For the first 8-9 years since 1994, and then I started to have more and more relapses, and we decided that I was probably building an antibody against the Avonex. The Avonex was also taking my white blood count, which was already low, down to a 2.7, which was extremely low. So they decided to take me, my doctor took me off of Avonex and wanted to try me on Copaxone, different type of drug, and I did not tolerate Copaxone. I had severe reactions, injection site reactions, pain that would last for weeks, and I had to do this injection every day, so I decided I just could not put myself through this anymore, so I quit the Copaxone, and that was the last FDA MS endorsed drug that I've been on.
The internet did attract desperate people with multiple sclerosis who had run out of ideas for how to treat their disease, and they came to the internet. Many of them came to my website and shared the ideas.
Several years ago, I think 20 years ago, Dr. Bahari up in New York City started seeing that some of his HIV positive patients were having a normalization of the CD4 cells. This normalization in an HIV population is unheard of. He theorized that it would help somebody with MS. If you believe in the theory, immunological theory of MS, then this would help that person. Why hasn't the FDA approved this?
Nobody ever thought about the possibility, what if a drug comes along that would challenge the existing expensive drugs that are already on the market? What pharmaceutical company would want to threaten its own line?
He said, you know how much money it takes to get a drug through clinical trials and approved by the FDA? I says, no, but I bet it's a lot. He says, it's probably over $1 billion now. He said, let me ask you a question. If you were a businessman and you invested hundreds of millions of dollars in a product, and when it came out, it didn't do what it was supposed to do, and it had horrible side effects, and then you found something that was cheap and easy, would you switch from your product to that cheap and easy product without any side effects, that efficacious product, and lose all of your money? I don't think you would.
To have disease progression, I decided I had had enough. And when I heard of something so simple and so inexpensive as LDN, and something that could possibly stop the progression of my disease as well as maybe improve my symptoms and cost pennies compared to what I had been paying, it was a no-brainer.
Don't beat a path to somebody who invents a better mousetrap. They just don't want to hear about something that challenges the old paradigms.
You don't need no stinking double-blind study to know that this stuff works.
I was reading Lancet not long ago, and I think this statement's very true. If everything has to be double-blinded, randomized, and evidence-based, where do new ideas come from?
Really, what I want, if I believe this drug works, which I do, is that everybody who gets a diagnosis of MS goes on it. Just like everybody who gets a diagnosis of cardiovascular disease gets aspirin.
Everyone here is a risk taker. Anyone who decides to go on the drug, anyone who decides to dispense it, anyone who decides to prescribe it, we're all taking risks. We're sticking our necks out, but we know why.
I feel I was very disappointed with my neurologist. I brought her printed literature on LDN. She never even acknowledged receiving it. I know for a fact that she received it, and I just feel that she's my doctor. She works for me. She's supposed to be taking care of me.
So I went to see the doctor at the end of that 1 month on 3.0, and she was kind of upset, a little miffed. And I says, well, what's wrong? And, and she closed her little notebook and says, I didn't appreciate you upsetting my staff. Excuse me? Talking about this thing is probably a placebo effect anyway. Okay. And so I says, well, I thought you'd be happy for me. She says, I'm better, I can do all this stuff. And she I tell you what, since I've tried this stuff in the emergency room at 50 milligrams, I know it doesn't work. I've tried it myself and I know it doesn't work, but I'm glad you think it's working for you. Her finger's right here. Susan's with me, and I went, well, okay, you write the prescription sugar pill, get the hell out of my life.
And there's a quote floating around out there with my name on it that this is a no-brainer. This is such a no-brainer. Even you scientific types, with all of the biases that are introduced here, discounted by 50%. Tell me a drug that treats MS that has 40-some-odd% of the patients with no exacerbations. Tell me one drug, please. Educate me.
We have to remember that 50% of the medications that are in the PDR are prescribed for off-label uses.
You know, it's not going to work for everybody any more than anything works for everybody. If this stuff is ever approved as a treatment, you're talking about saving $39 million a month.
This drug amazes me every day.
So in my 40-plus years, with my trial of every medication known to help Crohn's, with 2 surgeries, it always came back, always came back, always came back, and I never made it into remission until last April. And so for the first year in my life, I am in remission, and I think I'll stay on LDN.
We're talking people who have been helped by low-dose naltrexone is part of this people thrust that has brought low-dose naltrexone forward.
Every trial that they had, while in my early days, I was taking Copaxone and Nasonex at the same time. You don't glow in the dark.
Anyone know the name and address of those guys who broke the Watergate scandal news?
The problem is the power of the pharmaceutical industry, which in my lifetime as a doctor has gone from being way down the list to being the single most powerful industry in the world.
Evidence-based medicine is meant to inform us what level of evidence do we have for the practices we engage in. It's not designed to stifle trying new things. It's just designed to admit we don't have all the evidence we would like to have, but here's the evidence we have for the treatment we have under consideration. And I think the greatest mistake for evidence-based medicine is that unless it's a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, that it can't possibly work.
It really does work. It makes a big difference. And I believe that if it wasn't for the LDN, that I would still be in a lot worse shape than what I am.
This is probably the most important medication in 50 years, discovery.
It's an important story that just has to be told.